Harihi Om Sadashivasamarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yatkrupatamaham Vande Paramananda Madhavam. Om शिष्यात्म समर्पण कार्पण्य दोषो उपहत स्वभावः पृच्छामि त्वां धर्म सम्मूढचेताः यश्रेयस्यान्निश्चितं ब्रूहि तन्मे शिष्यस्तेऽहं शाधि मां त्वां प्रपन्नम् ओम. Okay, a happy Wednesday to you and welcome to this week's class. We are in the 21st shloka of Bhagavad Gita, second chapter. And here Bhagavan has been speaking about the Atma, and the concept of Atma kind of concludes in this shloka. And as I said, there are other traditions, including that of ours, which consider 25th to be the last one, and some consider 29th to be the last one, and so on. But Shankaracharya has written an elaborate Bhashyam on this, and that is what we are looking at. The shloka goes like this. Veda vinashinam nityam yayena majam avyayam katham sah purushah partha kam ghatayati hantikam. So the way that this started was with an explanation, and then Acharya providing his observation on this shloka. Followed by that, we were into the Q&As where Shankaracharya is providing the responses to those questions. Continuing from the previous class, here Acharya says, Yatha cha shastra upadesha samarthyad dharmaha astitva vijnanam kartu. Right? And this way he continues. Just as by the power of the Vedas, etc., the instructions given there, the knowledge provided there, the realization of or the revelation of dharma as it exists, and of the doer's connection with future rebirth arises. In the same way, knowledge of the self's changelessness, non-doership, and oneness should also arise through the scriptures. If anyone questions why such knowledge cannot arise, it must be asked, is it just because the self is not perceivable by the senses? Right. So that is one thing that what is in all the traditions, they use this particular word, indriya agocharam, right, where it is not possible for the indriyas to go and reach. All our indriyas are external facing only, not internal facing. And hence, the realization of the self has its own challenges. So here, if you remember in the previous one where the challenge was about the usefulness of Veda. If the Karma Kanda is waste, then the Veda is waste. That was the kind of line of question that the Purva Paksha has been asking. And now he is building on top of it in his response. And he is asking the resistance to the knowledge about the self. Is it because the Indriyas cannot reach it? Or because the Indriyas cannot make sense of it? It is not through objectification that you can understand the subject, is the kind of question, or is the kind of response that Shankaracharya is giving here.
Uncle ji, excuse me. अभी slide दिख नहीं रहा है हमको.
Oh, thank you for telling me. I'm sorry. Apologies, I forgot to share. So, just as by the power of scriptural instructions, knowledge of dharma and the doer's connection with future rebirths, etc., arises, in the same way, the knowledge of self's changelessness or the non-doership and oneness should also arise through the scriptures. That is the basic response that Shankaracharya has given here. The Shruti says that the self cannot be perceived by the mind alone, which is in Bṛhadaaraṇyaka Upanishad. Right? He quotes from 4.4.19. However, a mind that is purified by study of scriptures, instructions of the teacher, and by cultivating calmness, shamaha, self-determination, damaha, shamadamadi is the way that we put it, becomes an instrument fit for self-knowledge. Moreover, when inference, reasoning, and scriptures, agama, are both available, it is rash, or it is rather inappropriate to say that knowledge of the self does not arise. Right? And that is the most beautiful thing. Of all the things, I will just point to the inferences. Right? Shastra, everything put aside. You know that you exist, but can you point to yourself? You cannot, because as soon as you point, it becomes an object. Right? I say I, and I'm including my hand, sometimes even the pen with which I'm writing, saying I am writing. Right? But the I is free of everything. Right? And that is something that one can very easily see it and experience it. Right? So with your own self-knowledge, it is, Swayam Bhati. It is kind of, expressing its own self is the way that Shankaracharya provides a response here. Now, Bṛhadaaraṇyaka Upanishad, chapter 4, mantra 19 is what Acharya has quoted here. Manasa eva anudrashtavyam na iha nanasti kinchana. Very famous mantra also. But here it is only through the mind of the subject the self is to be realized. There is no difference whatsoever between the two. The mind and the object realized are one and the same. Right? That is the most beautiful part of it. Right? So, though we have differentiated into subject and object, what the Upanishads tell us that they both are together the one. Right? And that is the subject. One who sees the difference between I and the mind, either the mind belonging to I or I being represented by the mind, goes from death to death. Mrityoho sa mrityu. Atmanoti ya iha naneva pashyati is the way that mantra goes. Right? So from death to death. Remember, we were telling about the term death. Any change is a death of a previous state and a birth of a new state. In this particular experience, you will continue to exist so long as you do not realize that the I is a composite, a complete unification of the subject and the object. Right. So you cannot say that subject is me, the object is different. The moment you say that, it means you have not understood the subject, the Paramatma, right? Parabrahmam, right? We have always spoken about it. The moment we go into the learning, the first thought that comes to us is, okay, the object is a mithya, right? Which means object is not true. Let us try to look at only the subject as the I. And here there is a very clear reference that is given to say that when you see it like that, you are already in the path of mrityu to mrityu, or you are already in the samsara. You have not come out of samsara. So it is not negation of the object and realization of the subject separate from the object. Rather, it is the unification of both put together to be realized as the subject. So very beautiful mantra, and that is what Shankaracharya quotes in this place. Now, moving further, Jnanam cha utpadhya cha utpadhyamanam tad viparitam ajnanam avashyam badate iti abhyupa gantavyam is the way that he puts it. So when the true knowledge arises, it definitely destroys or removes the sins, or removes the ignorance, right? Removes the aspect of we considering the subject and object separately and being able to see the oneness of all. And this must be accepted, is the way Shankaracharya responds. Further, he continues, when people think I killed or I was killed, right? Kam gatayati hantikam. That is the shloka's reference here. Hanta aham, I am the killer. Hataha asmi, I am killed. So when people are thinking from this point of view, it is ignorance, because the self or the Atma is neither a doer nor an object of action. Bhagavad Gita says both the killer and the killed do not know. Right? So very clearly Bhagavan has stated, because the Atman is untouched. The idea of I am the doer comes only due to the ignorance. And this ignorance is very involuntary, because within the sharir, we talk about 4 kinds of sukshma sharir, right? Chittam, manam, buddhi, and ahankara. This ahankar, that I, association of the I, is inseparable to the nature of any creation. This naturally gives rise to the concept of I am the doer in our mind. But it is the body or already the object which is considering it this way. You are becoming part of the object and not a togetherness of the subject and the object. So that I am the doer comes only due to this ignorance. Atma is changeless. Actions belong only to the changing things, the body and the mind. Therefore, attributing doership to the Atman is wrong. Very nicely he has built his argument to establish this non-doership of the subject. The self is actionless, changeless, and free. Knowledge destroys the sense of doership. Notice looking at it from the other point of view, right? The knowledge that we gain destroys the sense of doership. Alternately, one can say that so long as I have the sense of doership in me, the knowledge has not arisen in me. Right? So that is another way of looking at it. So does it mean that I should not take any ownership to any action or anything of that sort? No. The thing is, that is a prakritic aspect, is the realization that we should have. And when I am looking at it from the I point of view, that I did this, right? When that kind of a thought comes into one's mind, together with that, I will also have the realization that the I that I am referring to is not the I that is I am. The I that I am referring to is the objectified aspect which is contained within this body, which is represented in this body through the ahankar. That realization will be always there in you. Right, in the 3rd chapter, there is a very beautiful shloka, karmanaha yaha akarmani paschet, akarmani cha karmayah. Right, both of them he puts it. Where in every action, I am able to see the self, and in every, the ability to say the I, or see the I, or see the subject. And the moment the subject is seen also realizes that in that akarta, that akarmi, he also sees the karma. That is, it is the manifested self. It is the objectified aspect. That realization will be there. That is what is the realization. The realization is not, I have realized I. Okay, that is not the realization. The realization is where I realize that the subject that I am is a non-doer. And in any non-doership, I see the object as well associated with it, which is the doer, which is always continuing to do. And that aspect is called as and such a person, Bhagavan says, is the utmost intelligent one. Anything that is required to be done has already been done by that particular person, is the extent to which he will say. And that aspect Acharya brings here, saying that for the realized persons, the karmas have no binding. He has no adhikara to perform the karma. Renunciation of all karma is natural for him. In other words, renunciation of karma, as in me not being the doer, but that which is getting done, is the way the outlook changes into a person whom we call as a realized soul. So there is a shift, there is a change in the outlook when you realize the I. And this shift takes time, takes curation, right? And it is sometimes a flashpoint, and sometimes it is, a long way of learning. In everything that we do, even here when we are learning, it is not to learn something. We are performing the action of hearing. That realization will be there, and at the same time that that subject object relationship will be very vivid and clear in your mind. Going further, so Purva Paksha asks, Nanu manasa iti vachanad na vachikanam kayikanam cha sannyasa iti chet. Very beautiful question. Since the verse says, by the mind, manasa, does it not mean that only the mental renunciation is needed, and that verbal, speaking, and physical, bodily actions are not renounced? Okay, this is again based on some of the schools that you see. There they say that meditation, we bring the mind into an actionless state, right? So that is the way that there are several people remove all the thoughts from your mind. They are teaching meditation from that point of view. So I would think that this question from Purva Paksha is in line with that. So he says that because the verse says by the mind, manasa, does it not mean that only the mental renunciation is needed? Right. And whatever that has been spoken with respect to the physical aspect, like Agnihotra, etc., or Vachikam, like what do you say, telling the Sahasranama, or even chanting Gita, etc., or the mantras, right, Vedic chanting. So those things are still covered as to be done, but only from the mind this has to be removed. For this, and this can be a very natural question that occurs in us also. Right? Here, the response says, na sarva karmani iti visheshitatvat. So there is a very specific thing that he has mentioned, which is sarva karmani. Everything is to be included in this renunciation. And because it is said so, we should include the manasam, vachikam, and kayika karma. Karma action is performed in three planes: in the mind, in the speech, and in the body. He says, because the word sarva karmani is used, the term karma here refers to all the kinds of karma. The tradition clarifies this further by giving a reference to the 5th shloka in the 3rd chapter. Nahi kaschit kshanamabhi jatu tishtatya karma krit karyate hyavashah karma sarvah prakriti jair gunaihi. So here, it is not possible for the object to go without action, even for a small moment. Right. And Bhagavan says that in this shloka, Bhagavan clarifies that karyate hi avashah, without any control on yourself, karma. And that is the nature of sarva prakriti jai gunaihi. Means everything that is born out of prakriti, which is made of the three guns, the karyam, the action, is absolutely inevitable. It is natural. Right. Manasa sannyasam as well as sarva karmani must be very carefully understood here. All that are born of prakriti are bound by actions. The problem is we bind ourselves to the karma. Sannyas of karma is not doing anything. It is freeing up oneself from the attachment that drives one to a karma. I become the inducer of the karma. I become the, one who thinks through, or one who thinks I am the one who is executing, and so on. That I association is the main issue that is being addressed here. So here, Shankaracharya very simply negates the Purva Paksha by saying no, because the scripture very clearly says it is sarva karmani. So you cannot ask the question that it is only for manasa. Moving further, now Purva Paksha asks, Manasanam eva sarva karmanam iti chet. Suppose you say it is referring to all mental actions alone and not the physical or verbal. This is again a possibility. The projection of I am the doer is something that I reflect on my mind. So that doership expression of the mind alone is to be removed. Right? Because in my explanation, that was also part of it, which can be very clearly misunderstood. And so here Purva Paksha is very tactfully asking that clarification. So Acharya says, na mano vyapara purvakatvad vak kaya vyaparanam mano vyapara abhave tad anupapatehe. Right. So the mental activity herein expressed or implied is sankalpa towards an action. Right? So that is the clarification that we have to keep ourselves. The commitment one makes to an action. Now, because speech and bodily actions are preceded by a mental activity. If mental activity is not there, speech and bodily actions cannot happen. Therefore, renunciation must cover all of it. Right? So, very nuanced kind of an action. Before I draw a painting, when we were talking about Stula Sukshma Karana Sharir, we have gone in this, where before I draw a painting, first is I have a concept in my mind. Then the nuances of the concepts are planned, and then they are executed. Right? That aspect of the Karanam being some kind of a concept, that some kind of a potence that we develop in us, and the description or the planning, etc., all of these are manasam. If that manasa karma is renounced, even the kayikam and vachikam automatically gets renounced. Okay, so now when we say that sannyas of everything, it removes the association to the karma, not the aspect of the manas, body or vak, etc., coming in the expression of the karma. Right? It is that aspect of manas to become the potent, the one which brings the potence, or the one that which plans or creates the approach, the concepts being defined, and then the body which is going to execute them. That cannot happen if you put manasa sannyasam to be like that, because without that there cannot be any action, and the action is very natural. It is not that, because what has happened in this is I have thought I am the manaha. Right? That I am the manaha is also wrong. Manaha is an individual object of its own self. It has to perform the karma that it has to perform. And in the Prakriti, it has to continue in its journey. What we are only removing is the association of the I into that karma. That is the way that Shankaracharya provides the answer here. Now, Purvapaksha asks, suppose you argue that excluding the mental cause of scripturally enjoined actions of speech and body, only the remaining other functions should be mentally renounced. This question arises out of the reverence that the Purvapaksha has for the Shastra, for the Vedas. Now, in the Veda, they have said the Agnihotra you have to do such and such yajna, etc. Right? Now, if we argue that excluding the mental causes of scripturally enjoined actions of speech and body, only the remaining other actions. So, my mind says that Agnihotra is my duty, so I have to do the Agnihotra. But about the other things, I will have to renounce. Right? So, me, what do you say, teaching, or me reading a book, or me going to work, those things are the ones which we are talking about the renunciation. But with respect to the Shastra provided guidelines. Daily Sandhya Vandanam we have to do. Right? So Sandhya Vandanam is part of the Nitya Karma. And this is, other than these kind of Vedic defined actions, if others have to be renounced, if that is what is the meaning, is the way that Purva Paksha asks. Acharya says, na eva na eva kurvan na karayan iti visheshanat. Right? So here, because of the special instruction, which is not doing and not causing to do, a Vedic clarification is the Shruti as well as Gita clearly specifies that the Jnani must neither act himself nor cause others to act. We discussed about it in our previous classes. Right. We will also use the same thing in the chapter 5 when we are talking Nakuruvan Nakarayan. It will come. Now, here, when we are talking in terms of removal of that, it includes all of it, which includes the Vedic karma as well. That renunciation should happen from the mind. There is no special exception that can be applied to this declaration, both in the Veda and Gita. Now, Purvapaksha further asks, Sarva karma sannyasah bhagavat uktah na jivatah. Right. So maybe this renunciation applies only to a dying or a dead person, not a living person. Acharya says, no, that is not correct. He gives the quote from the another shloka that will come in Bhagavad Gita later. Right, Navadvare Pure Dehi. Right, very clearly, the statement is undeniably clear in that place, where it is because the statement, the embodied one remains in the city of 9 gates, applies only to a living being and not a dead one. Okay, so here, if in case you are talking in terms of dying or the dead, when he is talking from that point of view, Purva Paksha, he is ignoring the fact that the Navadvare Pure Dehi, when Bhagavan says this word, it can only refer to a living being and not a dead or even a dying being. Okay, so that is the way Acharya responds. Now, the phrase having renounced in the body does not make sense because the body itself is inert and does not abide. So you are saying this, all these things, but it cannot have it at all because body itself is inert. So anything that action that comes up is only associated with the Atman, if we think from that point of view. Right here, Shankaracharya gives the explanation that na sarvatra atmanah avikriyatva avadharanat is the way that he provides the response. Bhagavan's Acharya says, you say renunciation in the body, but the body is inert, and saying it abides by, it sits, it doesn't make any sense. Everywhere in the Shastra, the self is said to be changeless. Sitting requires a support, but renunciation is just a mental give up. It does not need physical dependence. The word nyasa means renunciation, sannyasa. Right? Typically, the word nyasa means placing the God in different parts of the body, like what we do, Keshava, Narayana, Madhava, Govinda, etc. That is what is referred to as nyasa. Here, the meaning is renunciation, not physically depositing something. Thus, in Bhagavad Gita, only one who has self-knowledge is qualified for renunciation, not for karma. This point will be shown again and again in later sections of the Gita, is the way Shankaracharya responds. Okay, I got a little confused because of the term nyasa, but then it just came back to me. Right, so the the sannyasam, when we are talking about, is purely the ability to elevate yourself and have the ability to see the subject to be different from the object, and to see the subject and the object as the subject together. That aspect of it, that is a little confusing aspect, but there is no word that can be expressed. So this is the only way this expression can be done, where I see it as subject and object and realize this to be the subject, together to be the subject. That is what the self-knowledge is. Right. And what Acharya brings about is, when you are in this particular state, there is no action that binds you. Right? And Acharya further says it is going to be repeated several times in Bhagavad Gita with several questions and contexts. So we will continue on that. Then he introduces the 22nd shloka. Prakritam tu vakshyamah tatra atmanah avinashi tvam pratignatam tatkim iva uchyate. We will now explain the current topic, the prakritam. There, the indestructibility of the self has already been established. Pratignatam. So why is it again being discussed, or what is being discussed, or what is being further said about it is in the 22nd shloka. So that is the way he introduces the 22nd shloka in the 21st shloka, and we will proceed into the 22nd shloka. वासांसि जीर्णानि यदा विहाय नवानि गृह्णाति नरोपराणि तथा शरीराणि विहाय जीर्णानि अन्यानि संयाति नवानि देहि. This is a very famous shloka in Bhagavad Gita. This is often quoted, just like Karmanyevadikaraste. This shloka is also quoted to say that just like how the body changes the clothes, similarly the Atma changes the body. That is the context of this shloka. Similarly, Karmanyevadikaraste, where it is, what do you say, only adhikar is to do karma, right? Not on the results, and so on. So these are all very, very widely used shlokas of Bhagavad Gita. Going word by word, Vasamsi. Right, Vasamsi means garments. Jeernaani. Jeernaani is digested, which is a very common word that we used, as in the old ones, which is worn out, etc. Jeernaani. Yatha vihaya, just as vihaya, giving up. Navani grinhati naroparani. Navani is new garments. Grinnathi accepts or takes on. Naraha, a person. Aparani, other, is in taking another garment. Right? Tatha, similarly, Sharirani vihaya. Sharirani is body. Vihaya, giving up. Jeernaani, digested. Contextually, the body which is no longer usable. Okay, that is the condition for death itself. Right? It is not the bullet that can kill you. It is not the sword that can kill you. It is when the body becomes unusable by the Atman. That is when it lets go of the body and adopts another body and gets into another body. Anyati sanyati navani devi. Anyani is different. Sanyati unites with. Navani new dehi. He who holds the deham. Right. So it is a very famous and a very contextual shloka, where why is it that he has been telling about Atma and now he is telling about this Jivatma Bhavam, right? How is it that the Jiva and or the Atma and Anatma are associated? How is it that he is coming here? That is the introduction Acharya had given, right? Now, okay. In this, there are few observations that one needs to take into consideration. We were talking about the Karana Sharir, Sukshma Sharir, and Stula Sharir, causal body, the subtle body, and the physical body. This is something that we have always established. But there are traditions which attribute the Karana Sharir to be something that continues. Right? So, when this body is destroyed, while the physical and the Sukshma body is destroyed, it's joined with their respective elements, the Karana Sharir continues to exist. This is one of the schools of thoughts. This is again based on various, we have seen Garud Puran or other places where, what do you say, we take Reta Shariram, Pitri Shariram, and so on and so forth. Right. So there is a various kinds of things. Right. And what is taking all these things? And similarly, when we say, I bring the, what do you say, the karma along, my Purva karma is coming along to me, from where am I bringing this Purva karma? So there is a place where we are talking about in the karma also, we talk about Sanjita karma, a collection of all the karmic events that are associated to the body. And we talk about prarabdham, which is the manifestation of some of that karma into the current expression, current body. And then we are talking in terms of agami karma and so on, where it comes together. Right. Here, the concept that is being spoken is there are some schools which will say that this Karana Sharir is continuing its journey and moving from one body to the other. And this Karana Sharir is destroyed when we realize the Jnana. We come from a school wherein we say that it is the Ishvaraha which is the holder of all the karma, not the body, right? The Karana Sharir, which is the cause of this body, cannot be independent of this body and continues. There are two arguments to this also. Just like from the seed, it just the same tree comes over and over and over again. So this Karana Sharir is going to be the one which traverses from Sharir to Sharir to Sharir. Right. But that makes the Karana Sharir to be independent of the causal output. In other words, what it means is Karana Sharir. Today, I am a human being. So, my Karana Sharir expresses itself as a human being. Tomorrow, I am going to be born as a monkey. Then, the Karana Sharir is going to express itself as a monkey. There is going to be a change. So, because of that, what we say, and it is not wrong either way it is seen, but the way that we see it, the way that we teach in this particular tradition is to say that this Karana Sharir is belonging to this cause. this expression of the body. So that Karana Sharir is also gone with the causal aspects of this particular creation. Right? And then we are becoming a Atmaswarupam, which is bound still by the karmic cycle, and then you continue into the next body, which is as applicable by that particular situation. So it doesn't mean this is right or that is wrong. There have been innumerous discussions and debates around which is the correct one or which is the wrong one. I have personally not been able to find fault in the other, and I have not been able to find fault in this one too. It is just an open aspect. It is immaterial what you call this that travels as. Whether you call it as Jivan, whether Jivatma, or whether you call it as Karanashari, or whether you call it as, you know, Pitrushari or Pitrurupam, or whatever it is, right? Retas, whatever the term that we want to use, we know there is a continuation, and that continuation can be attributed to something. And whether if you want to call that as the Karana Sharir, it is okay. It doesn't make any difference. And if in case somebody argues that this Karana Sharir should be, I cannot have a cause for a painting creating a sculpture. All right. So from that point of view, if in case somebody argues, that can be negated too. Right. So that is one of the only subtle thing that we speak about when we are analyzing this in terms of a shloka. So in Bhashyam, how does Acharya takes it? An explanation of this is given by Acharya in this Bhashyam. As in, just as in the world, a man discards the worn out clothes and takes up a new one, similarly, the self, the Atman, abandoning the worn out bodies, goes on to unite with the new ones. That's all. Like the person who is fundamentally unchanging when changing clothes, the self is changeless and unaffected despite the change of the bodies. This is the core meaning. One thing that we have to again associate it to our current learning is, does this not make the object to be different from the subject? Right? The self is changeless and unaffected, but the bodies are continuing to change. This is the way that one can argue to say that there is still Advaitam. And yes, there is this Dvaitam, but that is the place where we introduce that this body is fundamentally of the nature, which is, it is dependent on the Atma and it is continuously changing. When you put that perspective in your mind, you will realize that when we say the self is changeless and the body keeps changing, what it reveals to you is this self is the wholesome, which is the Chaitanya Amsam, the Sad Amsam is the wholesome, whereas the body, which has a dependent existence, comes and goes. And that is the reason why we also have the other sharir, like, you're born as a monkey, you're born as a sage, you're born as a tree, you're born as a deer, and so on and so forth. That change is nothing to do with the self. It is just the change of the prakritikam, right? That realization should be there to say that though we are expressing it in duality, in the duality, I remain the one which is never changing, and the Prakriti is ever changing and has a dependent existence on me. Okay, and what I manifest into has no relevance, because I don't manifest into that. It is just the objects are taking the ashraya in this Atman as they change with the change. So that concept of it is again going to be a very difficult one to comprehend, but we will continue to go through it, and then we will come to a point where the realization becomes inevitable. It is just natural. So Shankaracharya introduces the 23rd here. Kasmad avikriya eva iti aha. Right? Why is the self said to be changeless? And he goes to explain it in the next shloka. Now, this is again a very beautiful shloka. Shloka number 23. Nainam chindhanti shastrani, nainam dahati pavakah, na chainam kledayantyapah, na shoshayati marutah. Nainam, na enam, chindanti shastrani. Chindanti means cut into pieces. Shastrani is using a weapon. Nainam, na enam, this one does not. Dahati pavakah. Dahati is burnt. Pavakah is by fire. Nachayenam kledayanti apah. Kledayanti is to wet, to moisten, to soak. Apah, water. And nashoshayati marutah, cannot be dried up by the wind. So here, the key observation that one can make is shastrani. This is made of earth, right? There are 5 base elements that we speak about: sky, followed by the earth and water, air, and fire, right? So these are all the 5 elements that we speak about. You can see that Bhagavan is not using the Akash, the sky, the ether, as one of the elements that does anything. Space merely provides a space. It doesn't carry a fragrance. It doesn't change. It doesn't move, right? All that which we can speak for Atma can be spoken for the sky as well, with respect to this manifestation. About the other dimensions, the space could change, or I do not know what it is, how it is. But in this manifestation, very clearly, sky does not have a role to play either in bringing you down or in bringing you up, either in bringing you a positive change or in bringing you a negative one, right? There is no impact that the sky makes except to provide a space. And hence, the other 4 elements have been given an emphasis. Right? So, Chindanti Shastrani. Shastrani refers to the earth. Dahati Pavakah. Pavakah, as we said, is the fire. Then Apah is the water. And Marutah is the wind. Marutah is the wind. Now, what it means is this aspect of destruction, creation, or the change is only applicable to that which is made of these elements. This body is made of these 5 elements, and I am the base to it. That is why that I continues while the base, which is the body in this object, is going to continue its journey of Prakriti. This body is made of these amsam, right? These what do you say, 5 Panchabhutas. If you pay attention, they say that body, 2/3 of this body is filled with water, is what they say. Right? And there is always, this breathing that we do, it is made of the air. And it is the heat, because the moment one dies, the body becomes cold. So this heat is there, that is represented in the fire. Right? And the skin and everything is the earth. And everything is contained within a space. If there was no space, even the heartbeat would not be possible. For heartbeat to occur, there has to be a space. For the blood to circulate, there has to be a space. Right? So that space is also there in the body. And when the body dies, the individual elements are put back into their individual elements. It is also in the subtle layer and so on and so forth. What Bhagavan says here is this change is not applicable to the body. That is how the shloka goes. Na yenam chindanti shastrani, na yenam dahati pavakaha, na cha yenam kledayanti apaha, na shoshayati marutaha. Now, how does the Bhashyam go? Here again, it is a very simple one, where Acharya says, Yenam prakritam dehinam na chindanti shastrani. Why? Niravayatvat. Avayavam, which is the parts, the limbs of the body. Because the Atman has no parts, it cannot be cut. You can cut if in case there are various parts. If in case it is a wholesome, you cannot cut it at all. That is the point that he makes it here. It is not possible to cut, which would create divisions or parts. Hence, no weapon can cut Atma. Further, he continues, Tatha na yenam dahati pavakaha agnihi api na bhasmi karoti. Right? And similarly, the fire cannot turn the Atman into ashes. And the same condition can be applied here as well, saying that it doesn't have avayavam and hence it cannot be burnt. For it to be burnt, it must be able to be reduced into ashes. Right? And hence it is not possible to do that on the Atma. Tatha na yenam kledayanti apaha. Apam hi sa avayavasya vasthuna आध्रीभावकारणेन अवयव विश्लेष अपाधने सामर्थ्य तद न निरवयवे आत्मनि संभवति. Now again, moisture cannot moisten the Atma. That which has parts, same thing, can be caused to separate by moistening. So here it is again a scientific approach. What is moistening? It kind of separates the things into pieces. I put a paper in it and it just totally starts disintegrating. The disintegration can happen only if it has parts, and because Atma has no parts, it cannot be disintegrated. Now, for the air, he uses a similar condition. For the air cannot dry it because air can dry substances like oil by absorbing their moisture. But the Atman has no such characteristics. And hence, the drying up of the Atman is also not possible. So, a straightforward explanation has been given to this particular shloka by Bhagavan. And herein, he introduces the 24th shloka. I don't know, I'm losing sense of the time. We will start with the 24th shloka in our next class. हरिः ॐ पूर्णमदः पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते ॐ शान्तिः 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 हरि ओं तत्सत्